Hey everyone, we haven't done this in a while, but I wanted to do this one today because there was supposed to be 6 VGCSs going on, I think, in Japan. And it's a new set, right? A new set. We want to see what is good, yeah? But a lot of them were cancelled. So we ended up with only 2 VGCS results. But it's still a good thing, right? It's still a good thing. New set got released, and we just want to see what's going on with the metagame, what's changed, is everything still the same, what are the top decks, stuff like that. So these two are team tournaments. As you know, team tournaments are very popular in Japan, and I mean, you guys say like, it's team tournaments, it's not good for data. No, dude, the prize fees are really good as well, right? Like these tournaments, first place gets stuff like 9 boxes, something like that. That's like 3 boxes a person, dude. Come on, it's nearly a carton. So yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad, and that's usually on the low side, I think. Like you get like lots of random stuff depending on how many people join. So yeah, there were 2 VGCS. We're gonna start off with the Yamano Kami VGCS. This had 16 teams, I think, 16 teams of 3. So you can see that the top representation here is Serif White with 9. It's like, it's just slightly over half the teams brought it. Bastion at 8, so exactly 50% brought Bastion in their teams. And then 7 Bruces. So that's like pretty much kind of the top 3 that we've been seeing for a while now. Bastion kind of dropping off near the end of the last season. Just because there were so many other better decks. Well, not better, but good decks as well, right? You had like Roro and things like that. And yeah, Roro did represent. They brought 6, and then Nirvana with the 5. And then it drops off after that here, right? Magnolia with 2, Exalt 2, Baramagnus 2, Greedon 2, Clarissa 2, Orfist 1 only, Flagberg 1, and lastly with a 1 Zorga. So yeah, that was pretty much the representation. So you can see a lot of people just still brought a lot of the old stuff, right? Because if they're good, why change it? So let's look at the first place team. Not really going to talk about the names unless they're like super famous. But yeah, this is the first place team. First player board is Serif Snow Deck, and it basically has 0 changes from before. No new cards. Didn't even run the crit trigger. You have to remember that the crit trigger is a 4K, which is kind of a pretty bad boost, right? It's not a great boost. 5K is boosting a 13K, hits a number. 4K doesn't really do that. The effect is pretty lame. It goes to soul, which is great for some decks, but Serif Snow is not a deck that requires soul. It does get a lot of soul already. So basically just playing a lot of the old stuff here. The grade 2 line is just pretty much standing of 12 really strong cards that basically not changing. He's running an extra Violet for the extra protection, but then he's got some defensives at 1. He decided not to run any Shovel Studs, which is fine because you already have enough prisons anyway. So, you know, you can kind of forgo that. So he's just running defensive stuff here. And, you know, before people would just like, on their offense, they could drain out your prison. So the security tron or whatever it's called doesn't get the extra defensive power. But nowadays you get so much prison that they can't really empty it very efficiently. So you can usually get that extra power, which is pretty good. It adds more to the defensive value of your deck, which is nice. Of course, there's just not really much boosters going on. But again, this really isn't a boosting deck. All of these kind of hit 15Ks by themselves. So that's that, right? Pretty easy mode. Second player on their team brought a Magnolia. So this one's kind of unique, right? Didn't really feel Magnolia was going to do anything, right? A lot of people saying it's a bit clunky, blah, blah, blah. But you know, someone brought it up, and it looks like it worked out for him. And his lineup, you have like the Dama Inaru is still doing work. The new Stag is pretty good. The AKPR that gets 10K when it's on the back row, I think, when it attacks in the back row. And it's like if you have 3 less cards in the back row, or 3 less regards, I mean, on the field, the card in the same column can't be targeted. So you can kind of make a like conservative plays, and against a very Serif heavy, you know, format, it's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. It stops your things from going to prison, and you know, that's why he's running 4 of them, and he's running one of the new, I think the new guard restrict kind of finisher. It's interesting he didn't run the Zorgdolia build because he's running 7 orders, you know, 3 Ghost Chase, 4 Wild Intelligence. I don't see why you're not running Wild Intelligence. It's just an amazing card. And then 3 of the new Trident. I think it's Prideful Trident, is it? But yeah, it's a Trident. The Trident Gale works extremely well with Dama Inaru, right? On the 5th attack, it goes to soul. When one of your units attacks as the 5th attack, it goes to soul and cannot charge 1. So it basically solves all the resource problems for Magnolia. And yeah, again, it works well with Dama Inaru because, you know, with Magnolia making another attack and Dama Inaru making another attack, that's 1 counter blast, that's 1 soul blast to make those extra attack, but they all get refunded. So good times. So basically, it's free. It's free. And then finally, the trigger lineup is just, they were now running less draws, it seems, because I think ever since Wild Intelligence came out and play, you have more ways of getting free cards onto the field. They can kind of lower the draws, so they kind of move to like 8 crit and, you know, 3 draws with a Stoic over trigger. Right, so pretty decent, pretty cool. Nice to see this list. And then lastly, we have the Ruru builds. And the biggest change for Ruru is that nowadays, you can't run 11 crit anymore, so you just switch to draws, right? And draws is not necessarily too bad for Ruru, because when you ran the 11 crit builds, you kind of can clunk yourself and just kind of you just don't have anything to put down that you want to put down. So, you know, the draws aren't too bad. It's the next best option. And look, if you're worried about shield, you have your grade 2 ML that's just like insanely powerful, insanely bulky, so it just solves all your problems anyway. So I think this deck got slightly nerfed, right? Probably went from like a 10 to like a 9.5. Not according to scale or anything like that, and this is not a 10 out of 10 deck, but I'm just giving you the idea on how much it got nerfed, right? According to my thoughts. Right, so it's still a very, very strong deck. At second place, we can see that finally we see our first Bruce, and this one, they're still running the Helldive, still running the Marjories. They added the Derricks. The Derrick is the new inclusion, but now the problem is with the Bruce deck, right? If you're putting in Derrick, you're putting in Leonard, you're putting in Eden, yeah? You don't have space, right? Something needs to go, and in this spot, the Dobers win, right? The dogs win. And I don't know, I think that is kind of bad, because the Dobers just are free extra soul, extra power, and just kind of push your alliance over the limit, right? To the next level. Your opponent is even harder to guard. So I kind of don't like that, but you don't really have much of a choice. What else do you sacrifice? Do you sacrifice Marjorie? That's what I sacrificed, right? I got rid of some Marjories, played more boosters, and that's that's how I ran it. But it's really up to you how you want to run it. I was running Pandemonium Tactics as well, so kind of easier to just kind of get another draw. And I soul charge harder with that order, so I don't really like the Marjorie there. But if, you know, since he's still running Helldive, which is a fine thing, I think a lot of people would choose either between the Helldive or the Pandemonium, depending on what kind of Bruce player you are. I'm not a very smart Bruce player. I just don't want to worry about my soul. I just want to go ham. That's how I want to play it, right? So Pandemonium Tactics works for me, but Helldive has been working for the past X months, and it will likely still continue to work because it doesn't drain your entire deck. And like, if you're not if you're a good player, I think you can just play around the weaknesses, take notice of what you need to be careful of, plan in advance, like 1 turn in advance. Pretty hard concept, but it will turn you into a better player. Otherwise, pretty much no other changes. Again, no boosters. You still have the Proto Bulb to get what you need and set up your turn. Right, so it's still a pretty good deck. Next, we have a Ruru deck again. You just sacrifice you just add in draws. You just add in draws. Otherwise, the rest of the deck is just all very, very simple, all very similar to each other. It's just a good deck. And then lastly, we have another Serif Snow deck. And this one does have some new cards. It has the new grade 2 card that forces your opponent to call a card from their hand into the prison, and then they draw a card. I'm not totally a huge fan of this. He's running only 2 of it, of course, so it's not really part of his grand strategy, but it's the key idea behind this is that it forces your opponent to draw a card. So it's like a mill card, right? It's like a mill card. If you actually play the Serif Snow Mirror, you will enter that kind of lockout stage quite often. So this could kind of help you win that mirror possibly, and you kind of expect Serif Snow to be a very, very popular deck based on the previous format and how it's still very strong now, even with 0 changes. So you might be going, okay, I kind of want to do that. Or you're playing against Bruce, you think you face a lot of Bruces, and you know, they can kind of deck out if they're running Pandemonium Tactics and things like that. You can kind of tank against their power lines. So, you know, you may, okay, if this game goes a bit long, or if they soul charge too much, I have an out, I can still win through deck out like that. But personally, not a huge fan, because I'm not a huge fan of this guy. I don't think he's been proven and tested enough, in my opinion. But your other choice, like your other choice, is just to run like the hand order, the hand lock order, which is okay. It's okay, but you know, if you want to go for the mill, I guess this is fine too. But yeah, not something I'd go for right now. And then he's actually not running any fronts in this run. He's running draws, right? Draws. So otherwise, the rest of the deck is pretty similar. So that is the second place team. Third place team. We're starting off with Serif Snow again, so once again, very strong, very powerful, very, very solid deck, right? Solid deck. This is the most standard build that you've been seeing for the past couple of months, I guess. Everything is the same, literally no changes except for the new crit, and then what you got? That's it, right? Get the PR. Pray to Bushi that this PR is coming, so we can play this deck as well in the English format. Second deck that they brought was a Bastion. So this is the first time we're actually seeing a Bastion. Pretty much this is the same Bastion deck from before. I think Ragrail is not a very good card. That basically the new triple R that we got for whatever Keta Sanctuary, right? I don't think it's that good. A lot of people I think also think it's not that great. So we're just sticking with the old stuff. The old stuff is just now with Rafael Sauce kind of broke in, right? He convinced us. He convinced us that he should be part of the deck. So now he's getting slots compared to like at the beginning of the format of set 2 format where everyone was just playing old stuff. Now, you know, that's basically the only card that's broken in. This kind of core hasn't really changed at all. Not even playing the new crit trigger because again, I've said before, he's 4K. And does Bruce really need soul? Not Bruce, Bastion. Does Bastion really need soul? It kind of does. It kind of does at some point, right? With Dark Strain, but you know, you have a lot of ways to generate soul here. I guess the only interesting thing is he's kind of replaced the Fasados with the Refalsos, which is kind of a move. That's like a big, I don't know if that's a big pro gamer move, or is that like a Fasado's not very good anymore kind of move. I still like Fasado. I don't know. I'm kind of not sure about this thing now that I look at it, right? Because he's still running Dark Strain, still running Refalsos, but you know, no Fasado. Maybe he doesn't expect the game to go that long, which is a perfectly good point. The Refalsos will kind of push his power lines quicker than a Fasado. Fasado allows you to kind of control the game a bit more, play a lot more grindy games. But you know, if he doesn't want that to happen, if he just wants to win fast, then I guess is the correct point, right? Correct choice. So that's pretty good. It's okay. It's an okay deck. You can check this one out. And then lastly, we have Greedon Deck. Now this is actually pretty interesting because it's not a Bruce deck. It is one of the new stuff that has come down pretty. That's, you know, it's come out and we're kind of like, is it really that good? Is it really that good? I think when we finally got Hystera, right, the deck kind of became better. You see that the interesting thing is he's totally cut out the first the grade 1 kind of guard restrict demon, and you can kind of understand why. If you're running Hystera is attacking first, and then your green one is double swing. That guard restrict is only going to be active for one swing. So what's the point, right? What's the point? Ideally, with this kind of lineup where you're running all like Gungarams and I forgot his name, the fire belching guy that just on attack soul charges 1, you will be hitting the kind of 10 soul count for Greedon pretty quickly. So your swings are going to be huge, right? Your second swing is going to be massive. So at some point, your opponent is basically playing for like just hoping to get perfect guards, or he's not really guarding anything, right? Now, a lot of, again, I have to emphasize this deck is basically more around your opponent not having cards or just like not healing. They heal twice, your game is probably done. If they draw all 4 nulls, your game's probably not going anywhere. So it kind of boils down to that. But you know, hitting those bigger numbers, I think, is still kind of a key part to like getting your Greedon to that threshold where your opponent has to guard PG or die. Which is important. And then he's also running draws, so he's not running fronts and he's running draws. And I think the draws are way more important than the fronts, because you got like, oh, front has more like defensive power, right? But the draw, this deck doesn't really gain much advantage. The best advantage it has is like a CB2, like suck in CB2 extra drive check, which is pretty overcosted, to be honest. So having a draw trigger is like your only other way to kind of get extra cards. Otherwise, you're sucking 4 in, and then you're drive checking 4, and that's kind of how it goes. And you still have to guard. Don't forget, you still have to guard. The other card is like I think it's a counterblast 2 soul blast 1 to call something out. Yeah, there's that card as well. But apart from that, it's yeah, you don't really have much choice. You don't really have much choice in what you want to do. I think it's a grade 2. Do you soul blast? I think you just call something out from soul, right? Something like that. I don't remember the exact details, but the cost was quite heavy. And if you don't, like, one of the other things is that if you use Greedon's turn, on the turn you ride grade 3 immediately, your soul is quite limited in what you can do. So having this extra soul charge from the Gungaram and the grade 2 is very strong. The flame belching grade 2 is very strong. Just to have more options, right? Have more options. You don't have to soul blast key pieces. So yeah, pretty interesting with this Greedon. Good to see that it did some work and came 3rd place. And then the last thing we have is the 4th place decks, 4th place team, of course. And we finally see our first Nirvana. Now, the interesting thing about the Nirvana is the new Himeno card. A lot of people were asking the question, is CB1 worth it to search a deck for an overdress card? Because CB1 is kind of, you know, important in the overdressed deck, right? People value CB1 here quite a lot because you're Nirvana, you know, you kind of want a CB1 for that extra power, right? Arcs, you want a CB1 for that extra draw. Expector nowadays, you kind of want CB1 for that extra expect the power, right? So where does the Himno CB1 come into play? Does it work? Does our urges is urging good enough for it? But I guess, like, here's the thing, you can Himno into an urge to countercharge that for free, so kind of just playing the same, it's basically a free search, free deck fin in a way, right? Free deck fin. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Don't get me wrong, that's pretty good. And then the other CBs you can just kind of work around, play around that stuff, right? Be a good player. That's pretty much it. Kind of the other lineups are pretty expected. The Expector is just replacing the Valiente. You only run 3. There's no point in running 4. 4 is a bit too excessive. And then what? Your other stuff you're definitely playing a 4 of. And what? The Fire Arena is still good. It's a good card. It's like a 30k. It's like a 30k swing with Nirvana power. It's pretty insanity. It's pretty insanity. So yeah, I think this lineup is correct. One Togashi Rashi because, you know, it's good to have that extra soul, but now you have crit triggers for that soul as well. And yeah, it's all right. It's all right. And you have more ways. You have ways to search things now. So yeah, you don't really need that 4 Togashi Rashi anymore. Right, and the trigger lineup is just running with draws. I still think the draw Nirvana builds are better, just because you can draw into pieces, draw into more things. And nowadays you're kind of minusing yourself a bit heavily if you wanted to play Expector. So the extra draw is I think is just better. Right, it's better. Next we have the Bastion deck again, right? And this one is the one that is running he's running Lepisto, but he's also running Fasado, right? So also running Fasado. But apart from that, the deck basically hasn't changed at all. It really hasn't changed. This guy didn't even bother running Refalso, so he's just staying at set 1 and then putting in the orders and then adding in some new crit triggers. And that's kind of it. That's just the deck. Easy peasy. And then lastly, we have the Bruce deck, right? The Bruce deck. Now we get to see some actual change in this lineup that I kind of do agree with. He is still running the Hell Dives, which is fine, but he started to cut some Marjories here to be able to add in the Derek and then also still run the Dobers, right? So I kind of like this lineup a bit better than the previous one, although that guy did place higher, but you know, that's how Vanguard works sometimes. His trigger lineup is also decent, you know, draws, crits, heals, and not running any fronts. It's really up to you how you want to run that trigger lineup. I think any one of them is better, but seeing this like 4 Derek, 4 Leonard, only 2 Marjorie kind of build is pretty decent, and then with 2 Edens. If you want to just run more Edens, you can just cut more Marjories, and I think he's good to go, right? So a pretty good deck. That was all of the top 4 for the first VGCS. Well, this is Yamano Kami, is it? Yamano Kami VGCS. That was pretty good. We're gonna move on to the next VGCS that only has two team results. Right, I'll only show the top 2, so let's go. Right, so we got the Hurricane CS. First place, we're already seeing Nirvana. Right, Nirvana showing up. This deck is only running two Expectors, only 2 Expector. Otherwise, the other grade 2 lineup is the same as the previous one that I saw. He's also only running 3 Himnos. That means he's now able to have 2 slots that are slotted in to Togashi Rashi to add in that soul. So again, the common thread is that we're seeing the Himno. Himno seems to be now only 2 results though, but first week Himno seems quite good. So maybe we should be looking into this card. That is the trend. That is what is going on. That's what's going down, right? The lineup is still also the draw, right? Draw crits are still doing the work. But apart from that, the rest of the deck is just kind of similar, right? Only to expect, of course. But yeah, it's an okay card. It's not great. It's an average. It's just decent. It's a decent card. It's crit, big power. Second one we have is a deck, right? Catgirl deck. Again, not much to say. It's running draws now. That's it. Still good. And then lastly, we have is Bruce. So this is a kind of a more heading to the new world kind of build, right? 4 Pandemonium Tactics, you know, 4 Eden, 4 Leonard, 4 Derek. The only weird thing is he's running the Gungaram, which on paper sounds pretty cool. Alright, because you know, your Gungaram Soul Charge 1, it has a Soul Blast 3 that can draw, and with Pandemonium Tactics, you're Soul Passing, Soul Charging so much, you can draw even more and get more advantage. I think it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. I still prefer the Dobers, of course. The Dobers are able to hit that extra power lines, make your opponent drop more cards. I don't really think the draw from the Gungaram is that important, right? And I mean, it does go through your deck quite heavily. It's just pretty much like a Marjorie, but now has 5k shield and only 8k power. Doesn't really get much power as well. But like ideally, you know, okay, that's your flex. So Dober's not 100% essential to the deck. Gungaram, you know, has some synergy there. So of course, it's not a bad idea. But otherwise, the rest of the deck is still very, very hot, right? Very hot. This grade 2 lineup, hottest hottest in the format right now, right? People say I love Bruce. This is exactly why they love Bruce. This is grade 2 lineup that is just insanity, right? Insane. Proto Bulb still pulling its weight pretty heavily. Yeah, this lineup is actually just insane, right? The only thing that changes is like the order in this grade 1, like, but otherwise the deck is just so solid. I guess Derek has changed. Derek wasn't there before, but the rest of the deck is so solid. Kind of just, you know, adding in things, you know, like adding in great cards. Just very solid deck. Then finally in the top 2, second place, we're starting off with a Relu deck. Again, just the draws, not much has changed there. Second place, we have the Serif Snow again. We finally see it in Hurricane CS. Really standard lineup. He's still running the Soul Charge Crit. That's like something new, I guess. Got the Shovel Stud, you know, everything else. Just very, very similar to your current builds of Serif Snow. So pretty nice. And then lastly, we got a Keta Sanctuary, and woe and behold, this is not a Bastion deck, it is actually Hexa Orb, but the Hexa Orb is actually running a weird lineup. It is running the Blasted Dark Ride Chain. Now, the interesting thing about the Blasted Dark Ride Chain is that, or the Ride line, is that if you go first against a Bruce, right, you can pop off their starter, force them to call down another grade 0 to be able to use the effect. So you've got that, this is kind of like an anti-Bruce matchup. I don't really agree with that, to be fair. I kind of still like the original Hexa Orb Ride Chain, because just the on-ride of Pentagleam Magus is just so insane. Look at top 3 and stacking that is just insanity. It's just great. You just look at top 3 and okay, I'm triggering this turn and you cannot stop me, right? So I still prefer that lineup, but you know, this is what works. Maybe he's in a meta game where there's like everyone and his mom is playing Bruce, even in a team format. He just really hates that matchup, so he's just running that Blaster Dark lineup, right? He's still running the Fasados, but he's got the package of new support, which is 4 of the new pink girl that kind of top decks check as well. So your top deck check is like insane. You have so many top deck checks. This grade 2 lineup is entirely just top deck check central, and Dear Glass kind of does that too, albeit with a CB1, and it is kind of, you have to discard a card. But yeah, the rest of this top line is just, or middle line at least, is just top deck check that is basically free. It's a Soul Blast, which is okay, it's not great, but you know, it's easy, right? It's easy. And then the new grade 1 that they got, Totoris, I think, is just you search for a Hexa Orb, so you're just Persona riding basically every single turn. I guess the nice thing here is that you're not afraid of just playing a Totoris the moment you ride your first grade 3 Hexa Orb. Is because, you know, before, when you're running the Hexa Orb lineup, you go, okay, I look at top 3, it's amazing, but my next turn I don't have a Hexa Orb, so I'm screwed, right? I can't use a Totoris because guess what? A crit no overtrigger is coming. So yeah, I'm definitely not changing that. But now you don't even run that, so you just go drop that Tortoise, you're okay, just searching, get that Hexa Orb, continue to play a very consistent game, and then keep on going like that. So okay, I think I can kind of dig that. It solves that kind of weird interaction problem. But apart from that, this is kind of a Hexa Orb deck that is just kind of going somewhere, it's doing work, and it's just what I kind of expected from this new set of Hexa Orb, except for the Ride line, of course, But apart from that, that is basically all of the new metagame right now. Of course, it'd be nice if he had more kind of results, but that's just how life works right now. Things aren't great. Sometimes there's a tournament, sometimes they're not, sometimes things are open, and sometimes you just have to stay home, right? In terms of what the metagame looks like right now, it's kind of similar to before. Your Serif Snow is still performing very well. You basically don't need to change anything. Your Bastion, don't really need to change anything, still doing quite well. And then what, Bruce, we kind of expected Bruce, yeah, it's doing okay. But then everything else is kind of doing okay as well. Roro is still doing okay. We see a bunch of random stuff pop up as well. So yeah, it's kind of, we have an idea of a good deck. This is like the giant circle of good decks. And then there's a few other decks that are just around that, you know, of course you can compete. It is a team tournament, of course. But yeah, it's just, we still don't really know the exact details of everything, although some of these decks, again, are kind of just figured out already, right? Like Catgirl, bam, kind of figured out deck already. So yeah, until we actually get some very, very more serious tournaments, which are it's kind of hard right now, we won't be able to know what is the exact max tune, perfect deck, perfect standardized deck, I think, for a lot of things, or the metagame settling down to the exact fine-tuned meta. But this is, I just want to say, this will be the BRO format, quite likely. So, because set 3 gets released in December, and I think the BRO is around then, right? It's around December, January, kind of that period of time. So these are kind of lists that we will be fine-tuning, that you'll have to fine-tune to playing that format. So it seems kind of interesting, and you know, something we should be looking out for. So hopefully you like this So hopefully you like this video. Let me know in the comments what you think. And reminder, tomorrow is the stream one, and it's going to be huge. Premium ban list is always hot. Right? It's always hot. So be sure to tune into that. We're going to have a big time tomorrow. We're going to have a big time. And I think they're hinting it's a big list. So we're gonna have a big party. All right, so yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next video as well. And peace out, boys. Bye.